Hello and welcome to Timeless with Julie Hartman Live. It's October, people. It's Tuesday, October 1st, 2024. I'm Julie Hartman, and it is great, as always, to be with you. 844-861-5537 is the call-in number, 844-861-5537. If you'd like to chat with me live on the air, we are live right now on YouTube, as we are every Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. You can also use the live chat, which our dear Sean McConnell over there in the producer's dungeon is monitoring. Quick note about our filming. I want to apologize to you for being late today. We were also late yesterday, not to expose our bad track record recently, but we have a lot of changes happening here in our Los Angeles studios, which have severely impacted our production. And also, just as a quick note, we will not be filming Timeless tomorrow. That's Wednesday, October 2nd. This is because it is Yom Kippur, the Jewish holiday, and Dennis has some increased filming conflicts because of the upcoming high holiday services, and we have to film Dennis and Julie tomorrow so that you can get your weekly fix of Julie Hartman and Dennis Prager, which premieres every Sunday. But I will miss you tomorrow, but I look forward to seeing you again on Monday. Today we're going to talk about foreign policy, and as many of you know, there was recently a barrage of ballistic missiles that Iran fired at Israel tonight. We're going to talk a bit about that at the beginning just to give you a sense of what's going on. But today I want to zoom out and really do a cursory look at the various conflicts going on around the world. You know, recently the US government, this is last week, came out with a statement that we, the United States, are closer to a major war than we have been since 1945. That is obviously a pretty big deal. But what is staggering is that few people are seeming to talk about it. We have a lot of protests about a lot of different things. But here we have the US government saying that we are closer than we have been in 80 years since the end of World War II to World War III. And we're not hearing very much of concern from the American population. So I want to contemplate why that is and actually look specifically at many of these events, because the real thing here is that few people understand or want to understand what has gone on in Israel, what has gone on with Russia and Ukraine, and how the United States plays a outsized role in these conflicts now, and how if we don't get our act together very soon, it could metastasize into a global conflict. But let's look here for just 2 to 3 minutes at what went on today in Israel. Iran tonight fired hundreds of ballistic missiles at Israel. The IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari said that during the defense, they intercepted most of those ballistic missiles, though he did say that, quote, there are some impacts in the center and areas in the south of the country. Now, I was perusing Twitter, our modern day new news service, really, because people can just take videos, send them into Twitter, and before reputable news agencies can go on the ground and get reports, people can change the public's understanding of what happened with just a video. There are apparently some videos on Twitter right now of impacts in Tel Aviv, though they could not be credible. So we'll really find out exactly what happened tomorrow. Israel has promised, as recently as 10 minutes ago, quote, a significant response and severe consequences for Iran. President Biden and Vice President Harris have said that they are monitoring the Iranian barrage on Israel from the White House Situation Room. And we also know that today there was a mass shooting near Tel Aviv, which, according to the BBC, left at least 6 people dead. Now, of course, this latest barrage from Iran is coming in the wake of 2 weeks of spectacular success on the part of Israel of eliminating Hezbollah commanders. This began a few weeks ago. We remember on Tuesday, September 17th, there were those thousands of pager explosions in Lebanon and Syria. According to the Lebanese and Syrian health officials, this killed at least 13 people and injured several thousands of people, including, they say, women and children. The next day, Israel followed up with another spectacularly successful walkie-talkie explosion operation, further killing many members, top commanders of Hezbollah, which is the Shia terrorist organization in Lebanon, funded by Iran, of course. That was on Wednesday, September 18th. Those walkie-talkie explosions, according to the Lebanese health officials, killed 14 and wounded hundreds of others. Then Israel followed up with airstrikes on residential buildings in order to further eliminate top Hezbollah military commanders. They successfully did so. They killed Ibrahim Akil, who is Hezbollah's military commander, on Friday, September 20th. And the few days after that, they killed Hezbollah's head of missiles and their Air Force commander. And then Israel was saying that in the days after that, Hezbollah was retaliating with rocket strikes. They've been doing this obviously for many years before October 7th. They've certainly been doing it a lot since October 7th, 2023. But then on Wednesday, last Wednesday, September 25th, Israel said that Hezbollah fired a long-range missile that actually reached Tel Aviv before it was intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome system. And then, of course, the culmination of all of these attacks came on Saturday, this past Saturday, September 28th, when Israel confirmed that it had killed Hassan Nasrallah. We have a picture of him here, the leader, the longtime leader of Hezbollah, in one of those airstrikes in Beirut, Lebanon. In addition to Hassan Nasrallah, Israel also said, and this was confirmed by Hezbollah, that they killed 6 other high-ranking Hezbollah military commanders. And then yesterday, on Monday, September 30th, Israel said that it launched a ground invasion into the south of Lebanon in a series of what they call, quote, limited raids to fully target and eliminate Hezbollah's existing terrorist infrastructure. This is similar to what they are doing in Gaza. They're going in and killing Hamas leaders. They've killed, according to the IDF, as many as 20,000 Hamas terrorists in Gaza, and they've also taken control of the tunnels, the east-west corridor, specifically in Gaza, which is a big part of Hamas's terrorist infrastructure. And they're doing this in Lebanon, or they're attempting to do this in the south of Lebanon. The IDF has said that they have neutralized Hezbollah's long-range munitions, in addition to killing all of their top leadership. So what we saw tonight from Iran was really a retaliation specifically for Israel's staggering success in eliminating members of Hezbollah. Because as we know, Hezbollah, the Shia terrorist organization in Lebanon, and Hamas, the Sunni terrorist organization in Gaza, are proxies of Iran. Before the October 7th massacre, we know that Iran gave the go-ahead to Hamas a few weeks before in Beirut. They funded the October 7th massacre. So Israel's success in neutralizing both Hezbollah and Hamas is hugely humiliating for the Iranian regime, which vows to eradicate the state of Israel. So that's the latest today. But as I said, I want to zoom out in our episode now and talk generally about the various developments in the world. Because as I had mentioned, last week we had a pretty chilling announcement. This is from the Commission on National Defense. They came out and said, quote, "The threats the U.S. faces are the most serious and the most challenging the nation has encountered since 1945. And they include the potential for near-term major war." Even worse, the National Defense Commission continued by saying, quote, "The nation was prepared for such a fight during the Cold War, but it is not prepared now." Few Americans, I think, realize what a vulnerable situation we are in right now as a country. We're vulnerable, certainly financially. We're $36 trillion in debt. We are vulnerable geopolitically. We had the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal, which was quite an embarrassment on the world stage. followed by Putin's invasion of Russia, followed by October 7th, Hamas's terrorist attack in Israel and the subsequent invasion of Gaza by Israel. We have China encroaching on Taiwan. They said as recently as a few months ago that the reunification of the motherland must be achieved. We are the global hegemon amidst all of these challenges. We also have a lot of domestic and cultural vulnerability. We have swaths of Americans who are going out and protesting in the streets as recently as 2 weeks ago, for instance, in New York City, chanting "Death to America," burning the American flag. We know that there are reports from the Pentagon that our aforementioned adversaries, such as China, have surpassed us, for instance, in their number of intercontinental ballistic missiles. We know that China also has, as I have profiled on this show dozens of times, has spy bases on Cuba to spy on our military bases in Florida. They also buy farmland next to our military bases here in the United States. There was a Wall Street Journal op-ed a few days ago that China has breached many United States internet providers and gotten control of their routing networks in order to potentially launch a cyber attack. And so we're in quite a vulnerable situation, and it doesn't seem like many of us actually understand, or even worse, know about any of this. And how different this really is from other times in our history when we've been close to war. I want to take us back. This really fascinates me, to 44 years ago. This was 1980, when we were in a similarly vulnerable situation as we are now. This was in the middle of the Cold War with the then Soviet Union. And I want to take you to a very specific moment, which, like this moment right now in the world, was when things started to turn. This is in the mid to late 1970s. In 1976, the Soviet Union deployed a new missile. It was called an SS-20. Many of you listening are old enough to remember this occurring. I, at the time, wasn't even a thought when this was going on. But the Soviet Union deployed this new missile in 1976 called an SS-20. And essentially, this was an intermediate ballistic missile with a nuclear warhead. And they put these SS-20s in the eastern part of the Soviet Union, close to Europe, obviously. And these new missiles had a range of about 5,000 kilometers that had the ability, in one swoop, to hit any point in Western Europe. And so this was a big turning point in the Cold War, because the Soviet Union hadn't developed weapons like that up until that point. NATO, the European members of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, didn't have comparable weapons to be able to, in one fell swoop, shoot from anywhere in Europe and reach the Soviet Union. So what happened was Europe turned to the United States for protection. And we, the United States, granted it to them. In 1979, when Jimmy Carter was president, we, the United States and NATO, said to the Soviet Union, if you do not remove your SS-20s, those intermediate range ballistic missiles, from the eastern side of your country, if you don't remove those missiles by 1983, 4 years from now, we, the United States, will put our own intermediate ballistic missiles in Europe with the capacity to reach you. And Western Europe was very intent on making this deal happen. And the United States, because we had our own nuclear arsenal, wanted to help Europe in standing up against the Soviet Union. And so obviously a lot of people at the time knew about this. They were scared about the possibility of Russia being able to hit any target in Western Europe. But then interestingly, as time went on, in 1981, specifically when Ronald Reagan was elected, there was a huge movement in the United States to actually not arm Europe with those intermediate ballistic missiles. Even though that was the very thing in 1979, which Western Europe was begging the United States for help for. We want you to put these missiles by 1983 if the Soviet Union does not take away their SS-20 intermediate missiles. But then in like 1981 and 1982, when the Soviet Union wasn't budging, they weren't removing their missiles, people in Europe and in the United States started freaking out about this. Here's a video. This is Senator Ed Markey, who's still kicking, like a lot of our politicians. Very fun to watch the videos of their younger countenances back in the day. This is a video of Senator Ed Markey from the state of Massachusetts. And look at this. He rallied 1 million, I repeat, 1 million people in the state of New York to protest against putting these missiles into Europe and calling for a nuclear freeze or an end to the arms race. Here's that video.
I've got a question for 1 million people. Do you want to freeze the arms race? Do you think that Ronald Reagan is going to freeze the arms race? We need your help in Congress. When the music stops today, when the music is finished, when you've gone home, the fight must go on. It is time for the United States and the Soviet Union to freeze. The whole world is watching. The whole world is listening.
Look at how many people. It's staggering. So this was a big deal in the 1980s. I have even more photos here where millions of Americans and Europeans were coming out and demonstrating, calling on their leaders to end this buildup. Here, as I said, are some more pictures from these various nuclear freeze rallies in the United States, which would happen every single weekend. If we can quickly put up the photos here. Yes, we see that. Let's put up the other one just so people have a sense of what a huge deal this was. And in 1983, by the way, the Soviet Union still didn't back down in removing their SS-20s from the eastern side of their country. So Ronald Reagan fulfilled America's promise, and he put United States intermediate ballistic missiles into West Germany. Those were called Pershing IIs. He put those there in 1983. People were freaking out. Oh my gosh, this is going to cause a nuclear war. This is furthering the arms race. And then what actually happened is that within 2 to 3 years, he got agreements from the Soviet Union to cut nuclear weapons. And they jointly agreed to stop. So he met strength with strength. But the point is, I really want people to get a sense of how much people were aware of what was going on and how much people cared. Because I don't think I need to tell you that nuclear war, any kind of war, is absolutely debilitating. But actually, maybe that is something that we have to remind ourselves of, because we in the United States, because we have been coasting on decades, centuries of prosperity and security. You know, the last time we were ever invaded here in the United States was the War of 1812. I mean, literally for 200 years, we have not had any kind of invasion. Of course, we had, Pearl Harbor, we had 9/11, but we have not had an all-out invasion of our country in 200 years. And so perhaps we have gotten too complacent. And we think that we're somehow immune from having any kind of war affect us. War is just something we watch on the television. War is just something that happens to those people over there, and we're kind of the people, the chess masters. No. This can happen to us. So let's look here at a picture of the world. And I highlighted the zones here that we need to pay attention to. We obviously see there Russia, Ukraine right next door to it. We see right below that, we have Iran, and then Israel, and then we have China. I should have highlighted North Korea in that photograph, but really the main points of concern right now are Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. So let's consider what is actually going on in each of these situations. Just briefly, get a really strong understanding. So let's look at Iran. We know today that Iran fired these ballistic missiles into Israel. What's happening right now is that Israel, as I had said, is humiliating Iran time and time again by being very effective in eliminating its two proxies, Hamas and Hezbollah. So the Iranian regime, in order to establish its credibility, they really have to respond. Now, I'm not suggesting here that they would respond with a nuclear attack, though I'm also not suggesting that they would respond with a nuclear attack. Our government has said, as recently as last week, that Iran is closer than ever to developing a nuclear bomb. And they have maintained since the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979 that they want to eradicate the state of Israel. And so now that not only did Israel invade Gaza after the October 7th massacre, but Israel has now completely eliminated the top leadership of Hezbollah and launched a ground campaign into the south of Lebanon. If there's any time where Iran is really going to pull the levers in order to establish its credibility, it's going to be now. Now, Israel, of course, has this great Iron Dome system, which, by the way, we do not have in the United States. We should have an Iron Dome system in the United States, but we have not really developed one because we're very lucky to be buttressed by two oceans. But we know Israel has the technology to intercept ballistic missiles like the ones that we saw today, or cruise missiles because of their Iron Dome system. But something that Israel would be shrewd to contemplate is its capacity to intercept drones. Because here's the thing. We not only are closer now than ever to war because of the various powers at play, but we're also closer now than ever to war because modern warfare has dramatically changed. Look at the pager explosions. Look at the walkie-talkie explosions. We have drones. We have the capacity for cyber attacks. We're in a totally new era of fighting. Russia, one of their defense ministers actually said, forgive me, I think it was Vladimir Putin himself, not a defense minister, said that World War III will be fought in zeros and ones. There's a lot of different mechanisms of fighting. And so with Israel, I think they should contemplate, Iran can put dummy warheads on drones. If they have a nuclear warhead, what they could do, and we see with all of the missiles they're firing, they like to do a bombardment. They could put 200 weapons on drones, and 197 of them could be dummy warheads. But then 3 of them could actually have a nuclear warhead on them. And hopefully the Iron Dome system has the capacity to intercept really low-flying drones. But what's fearful is that they may not have the capacity to be able to identify which of them are dummies and which of them are real. But if there is any time that Iran is really going to go balls to the wall and try to establish their credibility, it's going to be now. So that's that. That's Iran. Let's look at Russia. And this is all, tied together too, because Iran and Russia and China and North Korea are entering these global and economic alliances. You know that saying that any person who's an enemy of my enemy is a friend of mine? That's how those countries view each other with regard to the United States. They hate the United States. They hate that the dollar has been the global reserve currency. They hate that we have such outsized influence on global politics. They want to be the ones in charge. They want to have people trading in the ruble or the yuan. They want to be the ones who are negotiating deals between various countries to get better oil deals. They want to knock us, the United States, off of our centuries-long perch. And so when we look at these different situations, depending on what happens, they could step in and back each other up. As we know, Russia buys a lot of Iranian oil. Iran has supplied drones to Russia. China has also supplied money and military equipment from Russia. They all help each other out. So let's look at the latest update in this Ukraine war. We know in February of 2022, Putin invaded Ukraine. Let's put up a picture here of what he controls now. Essentially, what has happened is that Russia, this is picture, we actually don't have a photo of it. I remember. Sean is sighing relief. We were not able to pull a photo of it, sadly. But the eastern part of Russia, or of Ukraine, is now heavily controlled by Russia. In 2014, Russia invaded Crimea, which is the island south of Ukraine, and it stationed Russian troops in the Donbass, the eastern portion of Ukraine. And now, in 2024, Russia has pretty sizable control of that eastern border of Ukraine and Russia. AP filter in the House says he agrees with me. Yes, with Iran, Russia, and China. Okay, but people have to understand this. People have no idea what is going on. Here is the latest turning point in the Russia-Ukraine war, and it happened about a month ago, or within the last month. Ukraine, President Volodymyr Zelensky, has said that part of its new, quote, victory plan is to launch attacks within the Russian interior. So what's happened is that since February of 2022, Russia's been invading Ukraine, and Ukraine has been trying to push back and kill Russian troops. But now Volodymyr Zelensky is saying, no, we're going to go on offense now. We want to shoot conventional weapons into the Russian interior. And a big turning point in this war happened 3 weeks ago, a month ago. It's October. I just said that at the top of the episode, a month and a half ago. I am so sorry. Do you ever do that where you go, I was talking with somebody last week and it was like 5 years ago? Well, this is important. It was a month and a half ago in August of 2024. Ukraine attacked Russia's Kursk region. The Kursk region is just this small oblast, a region on the border of Ukraine, but it is it's part of Russia. It's like attacking Los Angeles. Ukraine attacked Russia's Kursk region in August of 2024, and according to Reuters, they carved out a slice of territory in the biggest foreign attack on Russia since World War II. According to Jessica Corbett, quote, Russia has said that Western weaponry has been used by Ukraine in Kursk, specifically British tanks and U.S. rocket systems. Kiev, Jessica Corbett continues, has confirmed using U.S. missiles to take out bridges in Kursk. Washington says that it was not informed about Ukraine's plans ahead of the surprise incursion into Kursk, and the United States has said that it did not take any part in the operation. But nevertheless, this is hugely important because when people are talking about the Russia-Ukraine war, we have a very ignorant population. As Kamala Harris so eloquently said, she goes, Russia is a big country. It invaded a smaller country, Ukraine. This is not good. It's like, that is the extent of the American understanding. And yes, that's true. It's a terrible thing that Russia invaded Ukraine. But when we talk about we got to aid Ukraine, we got to help Ukraine, it matters how we do it. Giving aid for the resistance, giving money and weaponry for the Ukrainians in Ukraine to fight against Russia is a very, very different thing than giving the Ukrainians weapons, to go into the Russian interior and fight inside Russia. And Vladimir Putin has said this. A month and a half ago, when this incursion in Kursk happened, using United States weapons, which the U.S. has said they didn't know about, but nevertheless, Ukraine did use U.S. weapons, Vladimir Putin said, if the United States and the British allow the Ukrainians to shoot conventional weapons inside of Russia, he will consider it as an act of war by all NATO countries against Russia. Here's a video of Putin saying this. Video 8.
Если это решение будет принято, это будет означать не что иное, как прямое участие стран НАТО, Соединенных Штатов, европейских стран в войне на Украине. Это их прямое участие. И это уже, конечно, существенным образом меняет саму суть, саму природу конфликта. это будет означать, что страны НАТО, США, европейские страны воюют с Россией.
Yes,
если
this
так,
is very important.
то,
That's what he said. He said if
имея в виду
this will be
изменение
considered an
самой
act of war
этого
by all
конфликта,
NATO countries
мы
against Russia.
будем принимать соответствующие решения, исходя из тех угроз, которые нам будут создаваться.
Are we going? Sorry, I didn't mean to talk over the video. There was some miscommunication there, but he's saying he would consider it to be an act of warfare by all NATO countries against Russia. Article 5 in the NATO agreement says that if one member country is attacked, then it is considered an attack against all NATO countries, and all NATO countries need to go to that country's aid. Putin's saying if this country, Ukraine, uses weapons given by you NATO individuals inside our country, Russia, we will consider it to be an attack endorsed by all of you. And they have been extremely clear about this. And so Americans don't know this. And during the presidential debate on September 10th, the way that Lindsey Davis and David Muir asked about this conflict does not reflect an appropriate and transparent understanding of what is at stake here. We're going to play that video in just a second, but I just want to reiterate to you what Russia has said here. This is according to Mikhail Sheremet. He represents Crimea, which is now under Russian control. He says, quote, "The ball is now in the United States court. It will have to take reality into consideration and carefully weigh everything before passing the ball to Ukraine, which aims to drag the US and Europe into a potential World War III. He continues, undoubtedly, the United States will try to implement its far-reaching aggressive plans to provide cruise missiles to the Kiev regime. They'll probably do that through Europe. But in any case, the price of this decision will be too high for them to pay, leading to the loss of their own statehood." So he has said, you're going to help Ukraine fire conventional weapons into Russia. You, the United States, are going to lose your statehood. The Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, continued this. He said blatantly, if World War III continues, it will not just be confined to Europe. He's actually made a point of singling out the United States, saying, you guys think you're immune to World War III? Wait till you see what would happen. He says, quote, "For Americans, any talk about World War III comes down to something that would affect Europe alone." This is quite telling. It reflects the mindset of the American planners and geostrategy experts who believe that they can simply sit the whole thing out. But they need to understand in this situation, we have our own doctrine, including the one governing the use of nuclear weapons. You know what? I hate to say it. This Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, is right. The United States, we do consider war to just affect people oceans away. We do think that it's something that we could tend to sit out. And he is saying, no, that's not what's happening. Quote, "The Freudian slips Americans make when they say having World War III would be a bad thing because they don't want Europe to suffer, it shows that this is what the American mindset comes down to. They have a mindset of a master sitting out there overseas and believing to be totally safe and secure, thinking that only the Ukrainians and Europeans will be willing to do their dirty work and die for them." But he said that's not true. World War III would include the United States. He finally closed out his statements by saying, we've been hearing speculation about the U.S. authorizing Ukraine to use these conventional weapons in Russia. They are playing with fire. So let's listen to that debate on September 10th. This is so important. This debate, in theory, and we know now it was grievously rigged. There were 8 fact checks for Donald Trump, 0 for Kamala Harris, 4 yes or no questions for Donald Trump, 0 for Kamala Harris. We know that it was very skewed, to put it mildly. This debate is supposed to put in front of the American people the stakes of the next election, and to be able to assess the global and domestic conflicts appropriately and discern what the various candidates would do strategically to mitigate those. This is, by the way, this debate is after these statements that I just read to you. It's after the Kursk incursion by Ukraine, and it's after the foreign minister and the guy who controls Crimea said that the United States will be involved in World War III if they allow this. This is how David Muir asked the question to Donald Trump. He said, do you want Ukraine to win the war, yes or no? And then he continues. He presses him to clarify. Let's listen, video 9.
Just to clarify in the question, do you believe it's in the U.S. best interest for Ukraine to win this war, yes or no?
I think it's the U.S. best interest to get this war finished and just get it done.
All right.
Negotiate a deal.
Well, that question does not give a good understanding of what's going on, and it reflects the ignorance of a lot of Americans, because a lot of Americans see this conflict as Russia invades Ukraine bad. Of course it's bad, but we are in this situation now, and Russia has also upped the ante with the certain steps that we would undertake and how they would react to that. What does this mean? Do you want Ukraine to win the war? What does that mean, David Muir? Does it mean that Ukraine gets full control of its territory, including Crimea, which was annexed in 2014? Does it mean that Ukraine gets total control back of the Donbass? What does this mean? And then he asked Kamala Harris about what she would do with regard to the war. And staggeringly, there is no discussion about what Putin has said. Don't you think the proper question that David Muir would ask Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is, will you allow Ukraine to fire conventional missiles into Russia? Is that part of supporting Ukraine? Should Ukraine use United States weaponry in the Russian interior? What's your response to that, Donald Trump? What's your response to that, Kamala Harris? But this is instead how he teed it up. This is video 10. Do we have David Muir's questioning, or we just have Kamala's response? We don't have David Muir's questioning. He said, I know what he said. He said, how would you handle Vladimir Putin and the war in Ukraine? Here's Kamala's response.
I believe the reason that Donald Trump says that this war would be over within 24 hours is because he would just give it up. And that's not who we are as Americans.
Okay, fine. We're not going to give it up. That's not who we are as Americans. But what does that mean? Will we give our weapons for Ukraine to go into Russia? She continues with her answer, but doesn't address this.
And through the work that I and others did, we brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelins, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now. And understand what that would mean, because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of the greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO, and what we have done to preserve the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence.
It really is such a staggering disservice to the American people, because they are not actually addressing what the main problem right now is in the conflict, and the main thing that Russia is saying would provoke World War III. It's just gaslighting the American people, repeating platitudes. We need to protect NATO. We need to support Ukraine. What does this actually mean? What is the specific response to Vladimir Putin? People don't understand this. And dear God, it may not result very well for us. Another thing I mentioned earlier that I want to follow up on in our last few minutes here is another thing that we Americans do not understand. We are so vulnerable to a cyber attack. And a cyber attack would actually be an incredibly shrewd thing for a country to do, because as Sun Tzu's Article 1 in The Art of Warfare spells out, the greatest thing that you can do is subdue the enemy without fighting them. A cyber attack on the United States would be a dream for our enemies, because you don't have to leave a lot of fingerprints. We know who it would likely be, obviously. We know who has the capabilities to do it. We know who has done it in the past, and that's China. I mentioned earlier this week, the Wall Street Journal said that, quote, Beijing has launched massive digital army of cyber spies to breach U.S. internet service providers and launch a damaging cyber attack. We know that in May of 2024, they hacked the UK Ministry of Defense. We know who would do it. But a cyber attack, you don't have to leave a lot of fingerprints, and it would completely debilitate the United States. Because every single part of our way of life, wherever you are listening to this, watching this, I want you to pause and just look around your room. Your phone, your computer, your car, your water, your electricity, your TV, the prescription bottle that you have on the counter. All of this is because of an interconnected system of technology and software that if it were neutralized or wouldn't work, we would basically be living as people lived in the 1900s. But what's crazy is that Americans don't think that this could happen to us, and they're not even aware that such a thing might happen to us or that such a thing is possible. And with all of these conflicts, whatever happens, if it's allowing Ukraine to launch these conventional weapons into the Russian interior, or if it's Iran, God forbid, unleashing a nuclear weapon in Israel or acting in another way to destroy the state of Israel, these countries are allied with each other and they will likely step in to help one another. I'm going to finish by telling you about these alliances. We have to know this. We've got NATO over here in the West. Well, there's a NATO-like conglomeration over in the East. It's called the Global Security Initiative, and it's run by China. China launched this in 2022 with the specific aim of, quote, combating Western hegemonism. In March of 2023, Xi Jinping met with Vladimir Putin of Russia, and they had this great, public handshake, patting on the back moment. They said they were dear friends. And Xi Jinping said that Russia and China were, quote, driving changes that haven't happened in 100 years. They also have this Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which is another alliance of non-Western countries which are aimed to help each other in combating, they say it, they don't even hide it, combating Western hegemonism. Iran is a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And they also have BRICS. How many Americans know about BRICS? How many Americans care about BRICS? BRICS is an economic alliance of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They also have Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the UAE. They just added them on. It's another alliance with the goal, you guessed it, of, quote, combating Western spheres of power. BRICS nations comprise a third of global GDP. And the leader of Iran, President Ibrahim Raisi, before he died in a helicopter accident a few months ago, said that one of their main objectives is to topple the dollar as a global reserve currency. So we have got to understand this, that they are going to be aligned in a possible large-scale war against the United States. And we even saw this with Israel. Let's contemplate what happened on October 7th. I wrote an article in the Epoch Times and the American Mind after October 7th. And I said, we cannot just think of this as backed by Iran. It is very, very likely that China and Russia were accomplices in what we saw on October 7th. 2 weeks before Hamas attacked Israel, the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited Saudi Arabia, and he gave this speech 2 weeks before October 7th. And he said that Israel and Saudi Arabia were closer than they have ever been to diplomatic agreements. And he said that these agreements, which built, by the way, on the Abraham Accords that Donald Trump negotiated when he was president, Netanyahu said that this agreement between Saudi Arabia and Israel would, quote, change the Middle East forever. 2 weeks later, Hamas carries out the greatest terrorist attack in Israel's history, killing, in American numbers, the equivalent of 45,000 people. Imagine if in one day, 45,000 people here were killed in a terrorist attack. They took the equivalent in America of 9,000 hostages in one day. You think it's a coincidence that that occurred 2 weeks after Netanyahu said that he and Saudi Arabia were entering a diplomatic deal that would change the Middle East forever? Of course it's not a coincidence. China, Russia, and Iran do not want to see Western countries and Western blocs get close to a country like Saudi Arabia. They don't want to see them trading oil. They don't want to see them negotiating diplomatic agreements. That's why China, in March of 2023, did this behind-the-scenes maneuver where he established diplomatic relations between Sunni and largely secular Saudi Arabia and Shia and fundamentally religious Iran. Saudi Arabia and Iran really didn't like each other. And China behind the scenes, as I said, in March of 2023, had them ease their tensions, exchange diplomats and ambassadors. That was a huge deal. And that was an indicator from China, I want to be in charge of pulling the strings. And so as we are entering this election, we have got to realize what a vulnerable situation we're in. And there are two main things that I want to alert us to that I think would really mitigate the growing threats that we're seeing from these powers. The number one thing is that we need to reestablish our economic power. And the main way that we can do this is with oil. We in the United States have the power to not only be energy independent, but to be an energy exporter. We were an energy exporter for much of the 20th century. And under Donald Trump, we were an energy exporter. But what's happened is that under the Biden-Harris administration, they have enacted a lot of policies to stop drilling. Of course, it's very complicated because some states are allowed to do it. They don't have a writ large control to stop drilling. But we know that once President Biden got into office, he killed the Keystone XL pipeline, killing 11,000 jobs and also one of the main sources that would have made the United States energy independent and perhaps an energy exporter. What do we do when we are not being energy independent in the United States? We entreat to Saudi Arabia. We entreat to Venezuela. That makes us more beholden to other people. We've got to be an economic powerhouse. And especially in order to combat Russia. This is really important for people to know. There is a Nord Stream pipeline going from Russia to Germany that provides a lot of Germany's natural gas. There were two of them. Somebody bombed one of them at the start of the Ukraine war. Many think it was the United States. But here is an important note. In 2018, Donald Trump flagged this. He said, if we are going to combat these powers who are coming together and who seek to destroy us, we have to be energy independent. He said in 2018, quote, "I think it's a horrible thing that Germany has a pipeline coming from Russia." This is before the Ukraine war. He said it's a horrible thing that they have a pipeline coming from Russia. I believe that Germany is going to be getting 50, 60, or even 70% of their energy coming from Russia. This is not good. People laughed at him. They mocked him. He said he was exaggerating. He was very prescient. So that is the number one thing. We have to be energy independent. And then, by the way, can we quickly, I know we're running out of time. Can we quickly play this clip? We have video 12. I want people to hear this, of Donald Trump talking about this in the debate.
I ended the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and Biden put it back on day one, but he ended the XL pipeline. The XL pipeline in our country, he ended that. But he let the Russians build a pipeline going all over Europe and heading into Germany, the biggest pipeline in the world.
Totally right. That's the number one thing. And the number two thing is that we have to get deals done. This whole Israel situation is not just embarrassing for Iran in that their two proxies are being neutralized. It is so embarrassing for the United States. We have the Biden-Harris administration saying every day, we're working around the clock to get a ceasefire deal done. Well, clearly not. Clearly not if there are pagers and walkie-talkies exploding in Lebanon. If Israel is carrying out airstrikes, killing Nasrallah in Beirut, clearly not. If Israel is launching a ground invasion into southern Lebanon, where the hell is the United States working around the clock for a ceasefire? Donald Trump, when he was in office, he got deals done. He, as he said, killed the Nord Stream pipeline. He got the Abraham Accords signed. We, the United States, have to show that we have diplomatic prowess. And please, dear God, as an American population, we need to demonstrate that we're paying attention, we're aware of the stakes right now, and that we care. On that note, on that happy note, that we're closer to World War III than we've ever been. I hope this has been useful to you. Please email me with your thoughts, your disagreements, your comments, anything and everything at julie@julie-hartman.com. And as I said, I'm so sorry that we won't be with you tomorrow on Timeless, but I look forward to seeing you next Monday, and enjoy the VP debate tonight. Be sure to tune into the Salem News Channel to see Larry Elder's analysis of it right after that show. Take care, everyone. I'll see you soon.